I'll call this meeting of the City of Villa Park City Council to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Present.
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 Here. Okay, I think the only item on the agenda is a financial update for the budget. Oh, that's right. How did I forget that? Vince, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I'd be honored to. Please cover your heart with your right hand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, is there any public comment before we begin the meeting? No? Hearing none?
Okay, the only item we have today, and today is our first study session for the fiscal year 2018-2019. We are going to do this a little differently than we have in the past, as I've advised you. Our first study session is this evening. Our second study session will be June 5th, and then we'll have the budget adoption on June 26th. Today is intended to basically kick off and start the process, basically for staff to have the opportunity to outline and more of a dialogue, if you will, to outline our projections and some of the basic assumptions we're building in the budget, allow you as a council to give us direction or input and tell us what you believe ought to be in there. There'll be no formal votes tonight, nothing is binding. This is a discussion intended to allow us the opportunity to incorporate those things that you all want in the budget into the budget. So it's, in other words, it is establishing the assumptions we're going to use. Frank will start off with basically give you a framework of where we are this year, and then we'll talk about what outline assumptions that Frank and I have identified. Again, there are no votes intended today, and it is really intended to be a dialogue, and hopefully we get some direction. On June 5th, we'll come back, basically taking all the input we get today, and say, okay, we put it all together, and here's what it looks like. We're high, low, or whatever we need, adjustments we need to make, and these strategies that Frank and I would have for you. At that time, you guys would say, well, okay, that was a priority, but I'm not concerned as much, and it won't be a formal vote again. Then just give us some more direction. Are we on the right track? The first formal vote will be the 26th of June. At that time, we will have a budget document in advance. We'll get that to you well in advance, so you have a chance. But I think what we're trying to do is a more efficient process to get the budget developed without doing multiple versions and having you, basically handing you a document saying, dissect it, figure it out. We're basically now trying to do it the other way and build it cooperatively and in concert with your thoughts. So with that, I'm going to basically kick it over to Frank, and he'll outline where we are for this year, and we'll start talking about some of the assumptions. I don't expect this to be a real long meeting because we've done a lot of work trying to outline things there, but it's up to you how you do. I know there's some prior commitments from some of you this evening, so I want to respect that time.
Good evening, City Council. What I'd like to start out with is our 2017-18 projections. Looking at first revenue, what?
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Can we see it up there?
Oh,
We
let me
need
get
to-
him to,
Oh, there
I'm
we
gonna
go.
come sit out there.
he's a little behind us, sorry.
Huh?
He's a little behind us.
Oh, thank you.
So looking at and trying to project 17-18 revenue, the biggest revenue generator is property tax, and overall, what we project is roughly $35,000 higher than what was budgeted with regards to revenue. The areas that we project that revenue will be higher is in property tax, the property transfer tax, which is the activity in the market with regards to sales of homes and properties. Interest, some of the building permits and plan check as well. What we project as far as being lower than budget right now is sales tax and franchise fees, slightly lower than what's been budgeted. Of course, we'll kind of polish the apple a little bit for the next workshop in June, we'll have a better idea. Property tax is a little bit easier to project because of you know, the tax charge that's established by the county versus what is collected and apportioned out to you know, the recipients is fairly stable with regards to the collection rate. It's pretty high in Orange County. You know, it's around 99%. So you know, we're pretty close to, you know, what we should get in property tax. With regards to expenditures, a little bit more.
Because
Yes, ma'am.
what is the total amount of revenue that you have budgeted? I see it's 35.4 over, but what's the total dollar amount that you have?
I believe it. I can get you the exact number, but I believe it was roughly 3.3 million in the general fund operating expense.
Yeah, we're talking specifically the general fund operating
Right,
revenues.
right. With regards to the expenditures, again, projections in the operating expenditure category, 108,000 under budget. Again, that's projecting you know, some of the contracts that we have that we know we're going to spend out, partly the salaries, benefits, trying to, you know, project those out as well. But again, those will be, you know, finalized a little bit better at the beginning of June. So we'll have a better figure for you with regards to that.
So for the general fund, kind of an overview picture, where we stand is probably about 100 to 145,000 under budget, or in a better, more favorable financial position than we projected and than we budgeted. So we're going to have unrestricted carryover of in tune of 140 to 145 range as we
Why?
estimate it right now.
Why?
Because of under expenditure, salaries didn't come in, weren't expended fully, or contracts, we budget at a maximum obligation on some of these contracts, for instance, and we're not spending out on all of those things. So this is a general fund type of thing. We also budget a contingency fund, as you recall, that we hadn't fully spent out, or we haven't fully spent on those things. So there's about 17,000 there that won't be spent.
So I have 20 days to spend that?
Didn't we have a contingency fund? Does that include this?
Yeah, that would be that's addressed within there.
Well, I
That's,
thought the contingency fund was more than this, so we going into the contingency?
yes, we
fund?
did. Remember, we had to do the temporary work at the Mesa Henderson storm drain. We paid $72,000 for that, and we
Okay.
funded that out of the contingency.
The second question is, what about capital expenditures? This is just operating expenditures in the general fund.
Correct.
What about capital expenditures?
Capital expenditures, we're going to be significantly under budget at this point because a lot of projects are being RFP'd or the contracts are being let. So they'll be rebudgeted for next year, so we're getting a handle on those. So for instance, the pavement project is out for bid right now. It'll be let in May, but the work will be done in June, and we won't be paying it until July, et cetera. So there'll be a significant, and that was about 800,000. So much of the capital funds too, and we're dissecting that, are mixed in with gas tax funds and things that are funding multiple services or multiple projects. So we will be under, but those will be typically a rebudgeted item that we'll have and recur next year. So we're planning on rebudgeting those as opposed to opening them up, if you will.
What I was trying to figure out is how much do we have left over, you know, in the general fund? For example, I think our budget, we had 300,000 or 400,000.
Yeah, you'll recall, that there was the unrestricted fund balance.
It'd be another 150,000.
Yes.
Plus whatever underspending in capital.
We had about 300,000 in unrestricted
In the budget.
FBA carry forward into this year. That money is not being spent. So on top of that, we'll have about another 140 to 145,000.
Plus underspending on capital.
The unspent capital funds, although I would suggest that those capital funds are being rebudgeted or carried
I
forward.
understand it being rebudgeted, but I have to understand when you rebudget, where's the money coming from?
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Right. Okay.
right. It would be unused revenue. Now, we will not be receiving some revenue we did anticipate, for instance, FEMA reimbursement and those things. So there's some complications there that we're trying to go through all that stuff right now.
Does the general fund include the gas tax and the increases that we expected from some of that
That's a separate fund.
separate fund?
Yes, a gas tax fund.
Okay.
So that's an interesting thing. One of the issues is that potentially that could be on the ballot in November, And what the question was, what happens to revenue we collect up to November, through November? We would retain those revenues, we just wouldn't collect any more after it's rescinded. So that's sort of a complication that we'll have to kind of move through a little bit and sort of budget accordingly. So I guess the bottom line with respect to our general fund, we are in a very favorable position this year. That doesn't mean we aren't facing some challenges that we're about to see as we go into some of next year's. So that's one of the things we'll be talking about.
Next, as far as the assumptions, of course, having to project a little bit of next year's 2018-19 general fund revenue, we're projecting a net overall increase of about 116,000. That's made up of an increase in property tax. In asking the county for a projection, the assessor has given us a 4% increase in property values, which equates to property tax revenue. So, I wanted to be a little bit on the conservative side, and in conjunction with Steve's concurrence, set it at a 3.8% increase. So, it's great if assessed values in Villa Park go beyond that, which would increase property tax. We also have a sales tax increase from our contractor, Muni Services, or actually I think they're called now Avenue, and they project a 3% increase from 17-18 actuals. So, those are the items with regards to general fund revenue.
How do you get a net 116 when
Well,
you have an increase?
some of the, we had this discussion, some of the other revenues will be down.
Right.
Some of the permitting fees and those types of things will be down. We're anticipating, so nets out about 8,000, 9,000 on the other direction on those. So that being said, we should end up with, and we're trying to be very conservative. I mean, candidly, we could be aggressive and say there's a lot more, but I don't want to, I'd rather err and underestimate revenues and overestimate expenditures, sort of as a rule of thumb. I think we're safer in that regard, so I don't have to come back mid-year and say, whoops, I missed on the revenues and I underplanned on the expenditures. So I want us to be in a position where next year we're saying the same thing, is we're in a favorable financial position. We are going to have what would appear to be a lot of available discretionary general funds. Like I said, 300,000 probably was the undesignated, was the unrestricted general fund. We'll also have the undesignated FBA will have about 140,000. So we'll probably be in the range of 440 there, and then you add another 115,000. So we're probably over $500,000 in revenues next year that we have to deal with. Again, one of the things we talked about last year is we don't want to budget that full 500,000 just like we didn't. You got to keep sort of a safety net. So last year we kept 300,000, and I think Michelle had a little heartburn that thought that might be a little bit low. If you watch the forecasts, they say there's a sometime coming down. I don't think it's going to hit right away. I would think in the next couple years, but we have some expenses that we do need to take care of. So on the expenditure side, and we'll deal with the general fund first, then we'll go into the other funds. Specifically, our law enforcement contract is going up 7.76%. That is a big number, but I want to remind you that I started at a 14% increase with the sheriff, and we are down to about a 7.76. So we didn't quite make it to half, but that's sort of the reality. You'll see the contract coming on May 22nd. The reason for that is our utilization. So we went, for instance, in shared services, we went 0.75% of investigator to 0.83 investigator. So we inched up on our case and workload. There's a number of other things that we are not getting, had not been charged with so much in the past, which is division overhead and things where they've had support services for some of our special events. And I think we talked about this at the Public Safety Committee, the sheriff mentioned. The events that we have here that require sheriff participation, they're charging those now, and they're taking a harder line about needing to be reimbursed for those. It's hard to argue that we're not getting those time, because we're getting those people. But in an effort to curtail that, and you'll see that in the plan, as events come up in the future, I've asked, and the lieutenant and I have agreed that we'll get a staffing plan in advance of what's going on, so we don't just have a blank check and say, oh, that cost you X amount of dollars after the fact. I want to know how much it's going to cost in front of the fact, and candidly, some of these costs will be shared with the foundation or those other participants who sponsor those events. So typically, it's been like a shared agreement on some of these things. Well, they're going to pick up a larger share. We're not going to carry it all. So, but we're going to know in advance what these things are, and the sheriff and I have agreed in a deployment plan.
Well, the fact that we've never had anybody share in those expenses before. The only expenses that have ever been shared is a small portion of Mike's time. So that would be something new if we charged for those expenses.
Yeah, and that is,
I'm not saying it's good or bad, but that would be something new.
and that is one of the conversations that I want to have with the foundation, some of those things, where in fact, they're sponsoring an event, they're paying for the event, but we're picking up a lot more of Mike's time and things like that. Things are higher than Mike's time is 50% budgeted, and we have rentals of some equipment and things. So the budgets typically creep up there, and as we creep, it's like, well, we need to have some recognition. We're picking up some things, and they need to pick up some more. So maybe they don't pick up law enforcement, we pick it up, but at the same time, they pick up some of the extraordinary things, equipment purchases and things that Mike has to do, lights and things like that we've sort of funded. The other thing too, in the sheriff's contract, there's a $4,000 increase for additional services related to, we added extra time for the deployment of time on the 4th of July. So that was $4,000. So $2,000 of that will be picked up by the participants. Remember, we agreed we would pick up $2,000, they would pick up $2,000. So if you were to, it's $120,000 if you take away that $4,000. So, the sheriff has, we pushed back and forth. My goal was to get it a little lower, but it is what it is. I'm also pushing overtime down to a minimum. One of the things I'm trying to do is when I see a deployment plan, is where we can, and the sheriff feels it's prudent, we use reserves, then let's use reserves for some of these things instead of having, a full complement of deputy staff on overtime, which is over $82 an hour to charge. So that becomes a very expensive endeavor. So what we're trying to do is ensure, and the lieutenant's been very good about that, but you'll see that contract coming up. Again, I think it's the best deal we can get, and I think the sheriff's provides excellent law enforcement services for us overall.
What's happening with this Mission Viejo study of the sheriff?
The Mission Viejo study is sort of reached a stalling point, mainly because the sheriff's asked, because there's a big election going on, and that will affect the outcome of the deployment staff of how they will look at their contracts. For instance, the sheriff, one of the candidates, and I don't want to get into it, but one of the candidates has said he's favoring a different kind of regional model that would involve sharing staff, than the other candidate or two is talking about, and that it will involve some negotiations and whatnot. So they've asked for this summer to have some discussions. There might be some resolution, hopefully in June, if not by November. So I think the cities have said, well, we want a long-term solution. We don't want a quick fix. We want something that somebody can commit to. And if there's going to be a change of administration, we want that, let that new change of administration be in office and make the change accordingly.
Okay.
So let me get this straight. From 14%, we have now, is that a final number, 7.76%?
Yes.
Increase?
Yes,
And last year it increased 2.9.
2.9,
That's huge.
right.
I mean, that's just, I don't believe we've ever had over 7% increase, at least not in 6 years we haven't had.
So the rest of the contract cities are going up between 5 and 8%. And I can tell you exactly what each of the cities are going up. The sheriff, one of the downfalls of doing this study is that the sheriff is now saying, okay, these costs should have been shared. We absorbed these in the past.
Yeah.
So one of the things they're saying, and at least this current administration is saying, is we've had costs that the cities have never had to bear that the general fund, county general fund was covering. Now they're saying, well, we're gonna, you guys want to look at this closely? Let's look at it closely. So
Is that increase because of our increase in community events? We used to only have 2 events, and now we have
it's a combination of.
We have
right.
8, and the school this year is having, 2 dad's campouts, which they've always only had 1. So I've got 2 different dates. Is that,
It's a combination of that. It's a combination of a 6% growth in their retirement rate increases. It's a combination of additional staff that they have assigned to us, like caseload. Like I said, we went from 0.75 to 0.83. Each one of those, that's hours. And when you add hours, you add overtime, and they're loaded with all their division overhead, et cetera. So The sheriff has, 4,000 employees, and there's a lot of overhead. So it gets to be an expensive, as you change those percentages, and rightfully so, if we have those legitimate workload, which he's shown us, then we have to deal with it. So it's a combination of events, salaries and benefits costs going up, and also our workload, our work activities for events.
What about the associated income that comes with, the hundreds of alarm calls that we get to certain residents that should be billed for it? Is there
This is
an
netted
offset
out.
to
This
that?
is netted out on that.
And so we'll see that when we get the full budget to see how much that
Yes,
is, because
yes.
I know that we've been very laxy-daisy with it, but with the 8% increase, we may not be able to be that.
No, this is a big
Generous
concern,
anymore.
yeah. There's a heightened sensitivity, like I said, so we're asking for things we've never seen before. So deployment staffing and, before we roll out all sorts of activities. But I mean, I hate to say this, but we get a Humvee for some of these things, and we get the sheriff's harbor patrol vote for all these events and things like that. The sheriff's starting to say, well, we're gonna start charging for some of that stuff. And I mean, it's hard to argue when they're sitting over at our city and are doing things. It's harbor patrol boat in the city of Villa Park. They can't very much charge that to Tidelands funds. It's a hard argument for them to make. So I can't really argue with them. And we had the harbor patrol boat on our front of our boat parade. So some of those expenses are legitimate. I sort of have to look at them and say, you're right.
This also assumes the SRO stays in place and everything is
Yes, sir.
status quo with that as
Yes.
well?
Yes. The SRO will be in place for a full year to allow them to cover summer school as well.
From the COPS fund, though.
Yes.
We saw the COPS fund.
Yes. The second item we have is election expense, and this is an estimate, 7,500. There is an election mandated, as three of you know all too well. And we will, this is an estimate by the Registrar of Voters. Now, they have shown us something that 60 to 70% of the time their estimates are high, but this is their estimate, so we're gonna put that in our budget. Animal care services, there's a $4,000 increase. That is, again, higher than I want to see, but one of the things that will be on the 22nd, this number could come down. This is one of the reasons we're doing, the County Board of Supervisors will be evaluating new sets of fees on May 22nd. If those are approved, we should be in a better situation on these numbers, so that will drop somewhat. This assumes current fees carried forward to next year. But there is, the fee structure radically changes if the board will approve it on the 22nd. Another item that we have is the Mesa Henderson storm drain. It's about, including design and whatnot, is $950,000. This is one of the things we talked about previously. We had $720,000 for it budgeted, and we said we were going to have to do about $230,000 in reserve. And remember, we talked about this last fall. One of the things that I would suggest as a strategy, and this is one of the things we should be talking about, is to the extent we are under, instead of using reserves, I would like to use some of the savings that we're going to realize this year to cover that. That's a reality. I'm not giving up hope on FEMA, but it's a reimbursement schedule. It's not in advance. So we're not going to get money in advance. We're going to have to deal with this and pay for it and then fight the battle to get money for it afterwards. So the argument I would make here is that, and one of the strategies and assumptions is we're going to take some of that savings that we're realizing this year that we talked about and put that toward covering it and reducing any touch. I would not like to touch reserves. I don't have to. That's my goal. And I want to go as far as I can with that regard. Which you'll see the next item was the increase to general fund reserve. Based on the formula as prescribed in the resolution, Frank estimates what, about?
A little over 65,000. But again, this is an estimate that could change, and we'll have a better estimate, at the beginning of June.
It's based on interest earned during the course of the year on our pool monies. We have, the number we have there is currently the balance is $1,531,700. So that's just a reference point so you know where we are. We put in, I'm not going to draw a blank now of what we actually put in this year. Under 100,000. I know that. I just don't know what it was.
Wasn't much.
Yeah. But anyway, under the formula as prescribed, I asked Frank to calculate, it would be, if you were strictly with the resolution, it would be 67. There is nothing precluding you from changing the resolution or doing whatever. The resolution says 50% of operating expenses. So that's what, but again, a resolution's a prerogative of the council to do whatever they want to do. I think we had this discussion during the budget adoption last year. So that's sort of where, one of the plays here. The PARS contribution, we had 100,000 budgeted this year. There's nothing going to change in our budget next year. We're planning on putting another $100,000 in. If someone is uncomfortable with that, help us know that. I mean, I know we've had that discussion in the Investment Advisory Committee about plan doing this for 3 years. But that is sort of one of the assumptions. We're going to put 100,000. That ties, but that would be consistent with our budget this year. So if you were to look at it, that doesn't eat up unspent revenue. That's just a carry forward constant that would be within our budgeted amount.
You said 3 years, I thought it was 4 years.
4 years total, I think Steve was saying.
3 additional.
3 additional years, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I misspoke, I meant,
Okay.
yeah. And the goal there is to address and to keep our unfunded liability to, our funded liability, our funded percentages to between 80 and 85%. So we're about 76% funded right now in PERS. So our goal would be to try and push that back up and fund it we are very healthy, but it would get us much healthier in a desired range is 80 to 85% was the target. One of the things, if you'll shift on to page 6, you'll see, one of the things is we have some IT challenges. I don't want to say that we've gone, and this is sort of my impression, we've gone the economy scale. We've always sort of, if a computer breaks down, we've tried and fix it or replace it. We don't have a real schedule. I mean, we have, some of these hard drives are probably 5 to 10 years old in here. And the speed at which they operate, they process and things like that is suffering. So I don't want to spend a lot of money, but you'll see another item, computer upgrades, a couple items down. We need to spend some money to keep ourselves moving at a pace to be able to handle just simply handle the programs and things. And one of the things is we need to upgrade the level of service. Now, the Brea IT 7,100, one of the things is right now, if I have a service call or whatever, I have to wait until the next day or the day after. So if something breaks down, we don't have anybody on site. Brea IT will get us one person a week for 4 hours a week in our offices. And that's something that I think, if we don't need them, we're not going to use them. But pretty much guaranteed we had trouble with streaming. It was so difficult because I had to call somebody who had to call somebody who we waited. And the other thing now is the call center that we're using will be transferred over to India. And I'm not overly wild about that because that means we're going to be dealing overseas on calls. I don't want to do that. Brea IT is just around the corner, and I'm much more comfortable. So to the extent we can afford it, this is one of those things where we may say, let's put it in now, but in June we may say, well, we can't afford it. We're not going to, that's not as much of a priority. I would like to plan on a phased computer upgrade and put 5,000 toward that. Not, that's a cap. But if we know that we have 5,000, we can say, okay, we're replacing 3 or 4 stations a year, then we're going to continue to move on and whatever.
5,000, like
5,000.
5000,
5,000.
which gets you what? It's not going to get you anything. If we don't have the right tools,
Well, it would
we
get us,
can't build a house. If we don't have the right tools, we can't run the city. So we're just as a notation, that's not enough. I mean,
well, it's not enough for the full
I mean, I'm not
replacement.
looking to be an Apple
No.
City Hall, but we are so
We're
under
okay.
technology in here. It's
Right.
the second graders have better computers. It's
But
just.
one of the things that the 7,500 or 7,100 would pay, Brea would come and help us develop a longer-term plan as opposed to us just piecemealing and doing things. We have hard drives that are failing right now. And 5,000, I mean, just to get a hard drive so I can get somebody to continue to work on a daily basis and not have to move from one workstation to another just to continue doing things. I need to keep up and operational. But the Brea IT will help us get a plan and I can move forward on that. So combined, we're making an investment of $12,000 toward IT.
And as a reminder, we lost a lot of data a couple years ago.
Yes, we did.
I mean, we lost years of history in this city
Right.
because we didn't have the proper
Right. Yes, we did.
computers, so.
So this
Well,
is sort of one.
Do we have a contingency site that we back
Yes,
up
we do.
all of our information? Okay.
That was established a couple years ago after we lost the data. There was not up until that point. I guess they did it internally. And when it was done internally, the site went down and then everything here went down and then it's all gone.
Okay.
So we have literally a couple years they had to replicate as best they could. I don't know exactly how much was lost in totality, but a lot was lost. And there are a lot of recreations and things where we believe that's the accurate information. One of the things too that we have talked about, we had budgeted 50,000 for the Wanda Greenbelt. Candidly, we need to spend some money, I believe, to spend some money on it. Now, I think there's a next phase that we need to put. I would rebudget the 50,000 and put something on top of that. That's my goal, and I'd like to put something in there. Again, it's the pleasure of the council, but I think we have some green belts that are showing some deterioration. I think we're going to see that have shown some deterioration, and we're going to see some issues, I think, coming down from the state because I think we're facing drought conditions coming up, and they're going to say no grass on green belts, no watering or whatever. We're going to have different sort of restrictions. I'm guessing as soon as July or August of this year, we'll see something coming down. And my plan is to put something in for the green belt for a next phase of something, because I think we don't need to do it all at once. We need to do a phased approach of some work. But, and there are lots of needs in Villa Park, but we can't ignore all of them. I think we have to piece some of them and deal with it. So again, it's up to you guys if you guys need to weigh in and say, nope, Steve, we're not. I get it, but I want to.
I have to leave due to a prior commitment, my 14th anniversary to the woman that I fell in love with a long time ago. So you'll forgive me if I cut this short. And I appreciate the presentation that Frank has begun and that, Steve, that you've gotten into and the questions by council. I, too, have a number of questions that I will follow up offline with council and then, if need be, vet publicly at the next meeting if they're unanswered. But I did want to say thank you. I think that you're on the right path. As long as we are protecting property values, public safety, infrastructure, and transparency, and obviously customer service to our residents, then I think we're going to continue along the right roads. Obviously, you want to keep that reserve at the very least at the statutory minimum. And if there's a possibility of going beyond that, then we'll get into that. But thank you for everything, and I'll see you at the next meeting.
And congratulations on your anniversary.
Thank you.
Okay, the general plan update, we talked about that as a process that we have to go through. There's a bid that we'll be going out with in June. We'll be coming back, the pending amount, but we need to budget something for that. The amount of that dollar amount is not known at this point. We'll have to react to what we get on a bid, but it's a mandatory requirement. We need to do our general plan. You'll see too, I've identified homeless litigation shelter, and I put pending there because it is a pending item. We are potentially, I understand the city of Santa Ana has filed with the courts, but I think they have like 30 days for them to serve everybody or something. And they are working through that process. I don't know quite why Santa Ana hasn't served everybody because, there's a process that starts going, but
They don't have to, they have 30 days.
they have 30 days. So we know we're getting served. It's been filed with the courts. We've been notified by the courts. Yeah, there's something coming and all cities are included. What does that mean for us? I don't know. And I don't know that I necessarily want to publish a number, but I'm thinking we're going to have to think about that and have something in our minds about what to do. And candidly, I'll talk about it in closed session a little bit about what my thoughts are a little bit further, but we
But
need,
regardless, it's legal fees, you have to answer.
yeah. Well, yes,
Yeah, you
yeah.
have to answer.
Right.
And you have a lot of people to serve.
I'm not sure exactly what it's like, 21 days to respond once we're served. And there is talk of the cities combining resources in dealing with some of this. Some of the big boys really want to have like already, the big boys, big cities, have already hired attorneys, rather large firms from out of the area that they're dealing with in an effort to deal with this. So some of this will play out, and I can't tell you, because I don't know how it'll play out, but we're going to have to think about it. I don't know what the judges can do. We'll see. There's a lot to be played out on this one. I hate to say there's a lot to be talked about.
So did we in the budget, are you putting in additional legal fees? Because
Yes.
can't come out of
Yes.
a retainer.
Yeah, you see that I have litigation/shelter litigation expense
Right,
shelter.
but we have to have some, I mean, to get into a budget, we have to have an estimate.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Well-
have 32 answers right there, just serving one particular answer is gonna cost us a fortune.
Yeah, well, we pay $4,000 a month is what we're paying for legal expense right now, which isn't going to get you much in dealing with a response to litigation. So I've asked Todd to sort of come up with a number and tell me
Okay,
where
yeah.
we're going to be. Whether we deal with that legal firm or another legal firm, there's going to be legal expenses that we have to incur. You're right.
So by the next, by
That-
the
that's what
next
you-
budget meeting,
yeah.
will we have something? Because that's,
Yes.
that could be a significant number.
Yes.
Very,
That's
very-
one of the
very,
assumptions, yeah.
Very quickly, that could be 50 grand, just in 1 month.
It could be double that to get into some of this, unfortunately, get into some of the prolonged litigation that could be there. Long-term, it could be that much, I've been told, and it's sort of scary, but it is, depending on how it's pursued, how aggressively. Since it is litigation, I don't want to talk about too much, but there's a lot to it. Plan check, we do have a lot of activities going on. We budget about $10,000 for plan check. We contract out with Malad and Associates right now, and we send over, and there's a lot of these contracting, the plan checks for things. So we want to put additional $2,000 toward that, because one of the things that continues to help the city of Villa Park grow and look good and develop is people's construction. We want to continue moving that at a fast pace and be able to respond. When people come in the door, we don't want to say, well, we can't deal with that now. We're a backlog and we don't have money for it. So we want to put some money in there. The budget contingency, you recall, we had 120,000, Councilman Nelson built in last year. We spent a lot of that on the 72,000 or 76,000 on the Mesa Henderson storm drain. Frank and I are talking a little bit about how we budget that. I'm not a wild fan of budgeting a number as contingency. I'm almost inclined to say, let's set up some, and we come back to you on when we need money, but I'm not a wild fan of people thinking that we have money set aside as a contingency, because it becomes sort of a target as opposed to budgeting it for specific purposes. So we have a lot of specific purposes. I'd rather put it toward those and sort of deal with it during mid-year when we have variances and things. So in other words, if we don't have money for things, we don't do things. If we don't have to, that's sort of, I treat it like my home checkbook. We don't go out to dinner if we can't afford it. Where we do need to go out, then we have to make substitute for things like that. But I need to owe you an explanation when we're changing or doing something during the year. And so I want to talk about that more with Frank, and we're having that kind of discussion about how we budget things.
But on that, what happens if you don't have a budget contingency? If
Well, I
something
think
comes
we-
up, then you come back and ask for a budget adjustment.
Right. And
But then, in the past, we just budgeted a 5% contingency, and then you don't have to come back with budget adjustments time and time again.
true, I mean, there's kind of different way, yes, it's true, but sometimes we're coming up with 140,000 of savings here that that we're coming under, right, under budget. So to the extent that we're coming under budget, 140,000, then I should be able to say to you mid-year, look, I've got savings over here, I want to spend it over there, and sort of deal with it that way, as opposed to just say, well, I've got money. I want to incentivize staff and myself looking at things that way. I agree that that's certainly one way to do it, but, it's not like I don't trust myself, but I want to be factual and transparent about how we're budgeting things. So budgeting a contingency, we're looking at that. I mean, Frank and I haven't come to complete agreement on, but we both come from a different environment where if we had savings in mid-year, we'd go to the Board of Supervisors or go to our legislative body and say, we've got savings over here and we have this need over there, we want to do that. We didn't say, oh, we got contingency, so we want to dip into contingency, and but we're gonna have some savings over there too. We want to be able to continue to look at the picture, a budget as a big picture. That's how Frank and I sort of
No,
grew up,
and
if we will.
when we did the contingency, I mean, Bill and I were in favor of that. There was a tremendous amount of work being done by the staff and the council coming back to us for budget adjustments.
Right.
So it wasn't done with, it wasn't an open checkbook for you guys to, to spend it, and you have it. There were parameters built into how much you can spend, and quite frankly, because we were such a small city and we have a budget and finance and we have an investment advisory, everyone's got a pulse on that. So the time savings involved in not having the staff work on those items to come to us to ask for a budget adjustment really was, it was a very good time-saving measure. So, I'm just saying, we worked hard to get that in there. And that was one of those areas that Bill and I were in agreement in, that I would hate to see it go away because it really has worked out well. So just to let you know
Yeah,
where
and I mean,
we're at on that.
Maybe the answer is we don't put 120,000 in, maybe we put half of that in there or something. Because when I put money in there as contingency, that's saying I'm not spending it on something else. And I've got other needs that I want to put toward that. I'd rather identify and you tell me, yay, budget for that or don't. I'd rather put it, the money toward that direction. That's sort of what my approach is. Like, I got to tell you, I'm doing the room here, I'm doing this or that. Let's budget and tell you what I'm going to do. And when things change, things change.
Budget
You're right.
management.
I get that.
But there's always things come up that you want to spend additional money for, and you come back for budget adjustments. We go through all this exercise of budget adjustment. So why do that? Why not just have a contingency? And then you still have to come back to us to approve spending the contingency.
True. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with it. It's one of those things that I want to sort of think about.
It took a long time to get this city, for us to get to actually have that contingency, and it really was it's worked out positive so far.
I agree.
So I just let you know, it was a big deal.
And I will be honest, I had a $480 million budget with no contingency. And I had to go ask the Board of Supervisors when I wanted to, add a $5,000 expense. So that's the world I grew up in. I'm sort of like trying to be accountable and so I get what you're saying. I totally get it and I appreciate that.
Steve, to me, with the budget you have for a $5,000 expense, you gotta go to the board. And to me, that's completely ridiculous.
I agree.
You should have sufficient space in the budget to take care of small items like that.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just sort of the training that we've got. So I'm undoing a lot of training that Frank and I have by, it's
But
inbred.
there's a little waste at the county, but we're not going to get into that right now.
But, and coming from an accountant's perspective, how do you show that with regards to on the financial statements? You can't have a line item for budget contingency and show expenditure there, because where does that relate as far as any other account? That's my concern, and of course we'll talk about it.
It's simple. You have it budgeted as contingency. When you spend it, then you put it in that account.
That's another way of doing it, yes. That would have to be, moving monies again, though, from the contingency to those accounts with regards to the budget, because if you budget in that line item of budget contingency, you're going to have to move it to that other account where you're actually spending that money for.
We don't have to move the money there. I don't get this thing about this line item budgeting, where you have to budget by line item. I see a budget as a whole budget, and the manager has authority to spend money within that budget. I don't see why you have to take it and put it into another bucket.
We need to look at this and we'll
Yes.
get back to you. I don't want to, I think your point's well taken.
Yes.
And we certainly will come back and think, and I understand what the councilwoman's saying, that something has been built over years. And I respect that. So Frank and I have sort of a different background orientation. Being very open with you and honest and where our thoughts were. We want to think that
Very,
through.
very different
And you've been very honest with us, so we get it right back.
We want to give you our background, because
Yep.
we worked hard to get
I get
that.
it, I got that.
It was a big deal.
No, and I get that. I appreciate that.
I've done thousands of budgets and always had a contingency. But you say you were asking for our feedback now. This is our feedback.
I said it was a dialogue, and that's what we're trying to
We
get.
don't
So I
want to go
appreciate it.
backwards. We don't want to go backwards.
Microphone?
Understood.
Okay. The next thing if you go to page 7, you'll see engineering contract hours. We increased our contract to get us a presence, and candidly, that's allowed us to move some of our RFPs and things forward. So my feeling is, and we keep them very busy on that. I mean, we have a presence on Friday, and we are moving things now at a much quicker pace and much more acceptable pace in my mind. So I intend to budget that 30,000. It doesn't require additional budgeted monies. It'll be a flat budget because we had it this year. We'll budget it next year. But my thought is I'm not going to take that step back, if you will, because
Oh,
I
so
do
you have
think-
30,000 more this year?
yeah, we have 30,000
And
that
you're
we
just
had
gonna
in this
continue
budget. So
that,
we'll
so it's not additional?
no, it's not additional, but it's the additional hours that we added to 30,000, if
Okay.
you recall. The next item is I am seriously contemplating, and I go on record, is ACCOC has sort of morphed in a role from ACCO's Association of,
Cities.
there's a C that I'm missing.
Used to be a coalition. Anyway, regardless.
Anyway,
Orange
bottom
County.
line, it's the group that sort of represents us. We're also members of the League of Cities. Now, what happens is ACCOC has morphed from a role where they represent us to a role where, and speaking for us, where we couldn't be or help us facilitate access. To sometimes now, they are sort of leading, if you will, and I don't know any other way to say it, but sort of saying, this is what you all need to do as a city. And I see that as a transition, because that's not what I want to spend $6,000 to have someone tell me what to do.
Yeah.
I feel that ACCOC does provide some benefit to us, but at the same time, many of their events are open and we could access those anyway. Not all members of the county all the cities in Orange County are members there. So there is some sort of feeling. I know of several cities who are contemplating the same for the same reason. And there are some specific issues that I can go into, but I won't do it right now. But I'm a little bit concerned, and there's a piece of legislation now that we didn't ask them to develop this legislation. They told us, we're doing this, you guys should opt in, and this is what we think you ought to do. And in fact, the language that originally came out, they proposed was, if you have to consciously opt out if you don't do it. Well, that's not what I think we ought to be paying for.
Yes.
So I'm just, as a fair warning, I'm going to suggest that. You all have probably different feelings about that, and we've discussed
But I
them.
would also look at the League of Cities. We did leave the League of Cities in 2012. We left them for 2 years, replaced them with ACCOC, and then ultimately went, because League of Cities, quite frankly, is the majority of the time, the stuff they're working on is not something that Orange County cities actually support. So and I agree with you, but before we think about doing that, I do have a call into Heather. We need to have a sit-down
Right.
discussion, because they have been a valuable tool. If they're changing, then they need to tell us that. If she's leaving and the model's completely changing, great, but it is a big buzz right now.
Yeah, and it's an issue for us, I think, and we ought to be thinking about it. I agree, the League of Cities, we ought to look at our memberships. We ought to look at
That's a
those and
higher-
what
that's a higher
value do they
bill.
provide to us.
This is the advocacy then, and they're just dictating to us, then there's little or no value there.
Well, I think, I look to you to give me direction, not an outside entity to tell me what's good for Villa Park. I don't mean to be too bottom line-ish, but I think that's what you guys are elected for. And I think that's what we ought to be thinking is, what is the return? Now, there is some return. They do some really cool, some really
Has been
good
returned
things.
up till this item,
Yeah.
up till now, and then they completely shut the cities out.
Right.
So
And
up-
you've seen it on some of this stuff, and I can give you some examples. I was on a conference call this morning. I'm like, wow, the cities are following here. We're not leading. And that's very obvious. And that's sort of, anyway.
One thing you don't know, Steve, is just recently, they doubled our dues with no explanation.
Yes, they did. I do
But
know
they
that
did,
much.
they did give us an explanation.
Oh, they did not give
Yes,
us
I
explanation.
could give you the explanation.
What's the explanation?
When we entered into the contract with them, which was maybe around 2012, 2013, we were not given the full dues. They gave us a discounted rate to get our city into ACCOC. So we had that discounted rate of, I think if it was around maybe $2,000 for a couple of years. Then it came up, and they said, we can't continue to give that to them. That was the tease rate, and then they brought us back up to full rate, which is what everybody pays. That's exactly what had happened. So when she came in here and talked to us, that's exactly what happened. So now we pay full rate, just like everybody else does. So it was a matter of, you give a discount to get your business. And they did good, I have to say. They're a good organization.
Yeah, no, I don't dispute
Provided
their
it-
policy analysis is very well.
Changing?
But just the role I see them taking on, and the specific impetus for some of the change has been the homeless issue. They have sort of really changed direction, clearly. And my colleagues in other cities are like, did you know about that? Type of comment.
Well, personally, I don't see a lot of benefit from them. For example, cities need something like legislative advocacy to try to keep Sacramento from taking all local control away from us. Now, when I look at them, when they go to Sacramento legislative days, what do? They go in there, they visit with legislators from Orange County that they can do right here in Orange County. When the League of Cities go there, they have a number of people that see legislators all throughout the state. They have a lot more clout than this one little organization going up there. And so I just don't see a lot of benefit for them. They seem more, to tell you the truth, it seems more like a social club to me.
Well, when I went up to Sacramento, Washington, we sat in a room and we had legislature come to us. So it wasn't a social event when I've
But-
gone with them.
I'm-
And they
I'm-
weren't, it wasn't like Senator Morlock coming in to visit us. So, I mean, he wasn't even on the schedule. We had people that we could never even talk to. So there has been a benefit.
I
But
yeah, there was some.
with that, if that benefit ceases, then our association should cease. Or we need to ask them what's going on.
Well, or we need to sort of like, and one of the things I've sort of talked about, I'm going to talk to Heather Stratman about this, is maybe we become an associate member or some way where we only have partial affiliate, something where there's a discounted rate because we're not getting what we participate only to the extent that we have access to events or things, but not some of the other things they're doing.
Or they change. You get enough cities who are looking at dropping them, maybe they'll change. They need to come talk to us.
Yeah, I think we ought to be careful in our discussions with them, because candidly, some of their policy analysis is right on the mark. They've notified us of things, the legislation that I didn't know about, and we're good. So I'm not going to dispute there's a value there to have an legislative advocacy. We ought to just, I agree with you, let's think about our associations. And maybe that's more than anything, that it's mislabeled, but we ought to look at our legislative associations is probably a better way to label it.
But, and see, I just don't see, when you went to Washington, you sat down with local legislators, right?
No, we did not.
Well, who did you sit down
We
with?
did, that's a while ago, and I don't remember who they were. We got a tremendous amount of
But first off, you have to sit down with local legislators, because you sit down with legislators out of your area, they're not even going to talk to you, because they don't care about you. If
But
you
they
can't
did.
vote for them,
But-
they're not going to do anything.
But they did.
And
They did.
you can't have the impact as a National League of Cities going to
The
Washington.
National League of Cities, quite frankly, is very liberal, and last I saw, we're not, that's the reason why we left them to begin
No,
with. They really
first-
do not
first-
represent Orange County, but I think that we should look at both of them. I'm
First-
not saying no to any of them, or yes to any of them.
First off, when you have a state organization and they take positions on issues, you're always going to have groups within the state that's not going to agree with you. That happens. I mean, I know the CSD took a position on an issue that people in Orange County didn't like. I took a lot of flack from it. But they were looking for the overall for the state, not just for what's good for Orange County, but what's good for the entire state. And you're going to have these disagreements that people in other areas also have disagreements with them on some issues. But when you have a state, they're looking out for the benefit of everyone, not just the benefit of a particular group.
Can I suggest that you have some conversations with Heather and come back and present to us what you think the value is to Villa Park to either stay or go?
That would be great. That's a good idea. I'll
That's good.
move forward in that direction.
Okay, let's
Okay.
move on.
Well, I agree with you. I think we should stop it.
Okay. One of the things we are building into the budget as an assumption is we had, as you'll recall, last year, increased our code enforcement hours, 8 hours. So Bill works an additional 8 hours a week on code enforcement. I intend to continue budgeting that. I sent you out this week an update of code enforcement active, closed cases, et cetera. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't get at least one call or some code enforcement type issue that comes up. So I do, I'm going to budget that. The next item we have, and this is the staffing augmentation. When I say upgrade current staffing, I'm not necessarily talking about adding staff. I may be dealing with it. And one of the things I want to talk about, the same with the salary, the HR committee will talk about this before our June 5th meeting. I would like to talk about the salaries and the staff and sort of talk about the staffing configuration. I've been here a year and a half now. I kind of have an assessment of where we're at. And I kind of, want to address that a little bit more. So I want to deal with that in the budget this year. So that's sort of that when I talk about upgrade or current staffing, it's sort of a heads up to you. It's not that I'm asking for bodies, because I don't know the bodies probably one of the worst things you can do is just throw money and bodies at things. The best thing you can do is think it through. And I think that's what I want to do and give you some sort of thoughts that maybe I expand the role, or we've got maybe a 20-hour person that ought to be a 30-hour or 40-hour person or something I can deal with. But let me have that. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to come back with that. So you're going to
If
see
you've been
something.
here long enough to assess your needs, part of the reason we were looking at all the initiatives and the number of hours that we were expending on all those different initiatives was to try to help all of us understand better what staffing requirements were needed to manage the city.
Right.
I see a lot of part-time, but I also see a revolving door, and you lose a lot of that knowledge, if you will, with revolving employees. So I think I look forward to you coming back and presenting your HR plan with the budget, because I think you're understaffed.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get to. I think we're going to need to do something here. And I'm, moderation, I'm a very conservative
understand.
guy by nature, but I think there is a need to, when I sort of go in and I walk in with my kids and, nobody's completely innocent, nobody's completely guilty of something, but there's always somewhere between, and that's where we got to get to. I got to get something you guys can see. But
So
I'm going to build something into the budget for that.
So you're looking for the Human Resource Committee to come up with a recommendation on merit
I'll
increase?
be coming to you, and we'll meet, and we'll talk before the June 5th meeting. So we'll have a meeting with the Human Resources.
Yeah, typically you just budget a percentage across the board and then leave it up to you to decide.
Well, that's what but I'd like to go through the Human Resources Committee and make sure because the committee was set up for that purpose. I want to talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
And even the way we address merit and what we do too. I'm not a big fan of across the board types of things. I believe we ought to be dealing with.
I'm saying budget across the board, then allow you to distribute it as you please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as you stay within the budget.
Okay. The next thing we're doing, we have the business license now. You can renew your license your business license online. You are now to the point where you can't pay online yet, but we can get you to the point of renewing it online, which is a big plus because we can issue an invoice or whatever. The next step is we have the ability in our system to be able to do that. There's a module, but I've got a number, but I want to refine that number, et cetera. But I'm going to put something in there because I think we're able to do that. The other thing I would like to do, if you notice the line of people, if you come in during a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you see the people coming in to see Bill because they have to get their building permit issued here. Some of them, they don't even know how much it's going to be. They can't even calculate it till they come in here. I think if we there are modules that are out there
Calculators.
that have automated building permit automation things. We did a webinar just the other day with Akram and Twee and Bill were all talking about it, where there is something then that when it's issued, then Bill can have it all online. When he goes out and does the inspection, it's on, we can give him an iPad, for instance, and he can update it online, and we'll have it in the office here, so we know exactly status and everything else.
Welcome to
So,
2018.
huh?
Welcome to 2018.
Well, we're trying to get there, and that's one of the things I'm going to budget for in my plans for the coming year.
By the way, my renewal notice, because I couldn't do it online, and my check are sitting on your desk.
Okay, see, the check you have to bring in.
No.
The item here is, the next item you'll see on page 7 is council travel. We had typically budgeted $3,500 per councilman and $4,500 for the mayor. Then we found that the use was changing, and I think Councilman Nelson, you may have still been mayor at the time, saying, I'm not going to spend all mine. We can spread it. So we've kind of used it as, it's morphed into almost a pool. But that's sort of a question to the council. How do you want to deal with this? Because some of the council members travel more than others. By human nature, they're going to travel and have free time or whatever. And some have preferences, whatever they want to do. So I kind of need some feedback about how you want to deal with travel and where do you want to cap it at some amount? How do you want to deal with it as a dollar amount? I know we have processes about travel and filling reports and things of those nature, but I'm talking about what do we want to budget for travel and as a number. That's a policy call by you guys. There's no prescriptive magic numbers.
I like the individual budgets, and the reason I do is because I like to know how much I have available, and then I can prioritize what trips and what things that I can be involved in to best maximize my time personally, and also for the city to maximize the benefit for the city. So I personally would like the individual.
Okay.
And if we need to move things around because somebody doesn't travel, then that's okay, I guess.
Yeah, and that's sort of what's happened.
Yeah, I would agree with him. I like that. And if someone else wants to travel more, they can try to get someone else to let them have some of their budget to use. But I like currently the way we do it.
Okay. And that will be, there are 2 council members that travel more and would probably bump up against the level of budget or close to, maybe not, but they're getting closer. Whereas some of them are be significantly under because they just travel less. So we'll budget that accordingly then.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now we want to get into a little bit of the non-general fund. We've been talking everything mostly of the general fund. Now we need to get sort of like the non-general fund where gas taxes are paying for it, or we have some state monies or SB1 monies or whatever, OCTA monies that are paying for some of this. We will be rebudgeting $800,000 for the street project, not because the project will be let and work will be done, but we're not gonna make payments until July, because we don't pay
So you
till the
said
work.
starting in May and it'll go
Yeah.
over into the next year?
It'll go into next year. So we will not, so we'll budget the 800,000 or whatever unspent, we'll rebudget for next year.
Okay.
That's for the first phase, and those were the streets, you recall, in October, we agreed to the list. You see an item there that says next phase. Do you want us to, I mean, you know, do we need to go a next phase? Do you want us to do, we are currently doing an updated study of all of our roads at this point that we're required by Measure M to do every 2 years. So we'll have a better PCI index update on 2 year for it. And I think that's in process. The council approved the contract for that. So by June, we'll have, actually probably by June, we'll have a better index.
So you'll be able to come back and tell us what streets need to be fixed in the next phase and how much that's gonna cost?
We'll be able to, well, we'll be able to tell you what street indexes will be and what the question is, and just like with the 800,000, we sort of set the money at 800,000 and knowing what we could get done. You could set the money at 400,000, 300,000, you know, we can do what we can do for those amounts of money. That's sort of the question. Do you want us to, you know, how do we do, I think we probably need to continue doing something because there are still gonna be streets that, I get calls that aren't on this list that still need to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a study a couple of years ago, wasn't it, that said we need to spend $1 million a year for 7 years
Yeah.
to maintain our streets?
Yeah, I don't
And this is
think we're gonna
800,000.
level.
So I think we should be near that level for each year.
Yeah, and I think, you know, beyond just thinking about what needs to be repaired, what kind of preventive maintenance are we doing so that we can reduce our repair bill?
Okay. Okay, so I'm getting the message that we will have some money budgeted for next
Yes.
year. Continue. We also, if you skip down, there's a street maintenance, a rebudget as well. I know, Mayor, you've talked about that, the 40,000 that we had budgeted. It's the second to last item. We're going to rebudget that and actually budget more, you know. Rebudget mean we're gonna spend the 40,000 this year, we're gonna spend another 40, we're gonna put another budget for that. Because that's not, those are the emergency, you know, we have a rain and all of a sudden a road that we didn't plan on, we get a sinkhole or we get something we gotta deal with, that's where we spend that money. So I'm gonna
So
budget for
will we
that.
be doing any street repairs this
Yes.
fiscal year?
Oh, yeah, we've got those all, they're all programmed out. So I think what Akram has told me that some of those will be done by the current provider that we just did here.
Okay.
So we'll be amending the contract by about $40,000 for him to hit these other isolated ones. And it's more efficient for him to do it probably because they're out there and can get it done. We don't have to have a separate contract where they have to mobilize a whole crew and do all that kind of stuff. So they'll have all the materials they'll need, et cetera.
Okay, great.
So that's the plan. The DG repair is in process. There'll be 55,000 was what is going on. It is in process. They're actually matching the DG right now, the color. Believe it or not, they had color samples. It looked like Akram had packets of plastic dirt in his office. But they were measuring, so some of that 55,000 will have to be rebudgeted, just simply because it may or may not get done. But the work, it should be starting within a week, I believe, or a week or two. We should be doing some of that.
What is the DG trailer?
The decomposed granite, the trails that we have around through here.
Trail,
Trails.
okay,
What
trail,
trails?
okay, yeah.
The trails we had.
I was reading it as trail, I don't know why.
trails?
Yeah,
Okay,
decomposed granite, that's what they call it.
okay, I got you,
Not a-
trails, yeah.
Steve, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
There's a lot of people standing outside the door. Did this room get double booked or something?
No?
Okay, just curious. I mean, they've got a whole bunch of stuff out there. Looks like they're waiting to come in.
No?
Okay.
No, not. Okay, we're going to continue, we have PEG funds, as you recall, those are the cable franchise funds that we get. So we're going to continue to do things here to automate. We've talked about putting screens up here. I haven't done it yet because we've spent our PEGs money up this year, so you sort of get allotment and I spend it and then we get allotment. We'll be putting up screens, we'll be enlarging the screens here. But you're going to see the continual upgrade here and we'll be budgeting something for that. I think we really need to continue, like it's 2018, we probably should plan for 2025, not catch up to 2018. We need to think ahead. And I think what I want it to be is a user-friendly situation here for residents who come in.
This technology changes every 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, it's antiquated in 12 or 18 months.
Yep. And we're still operating. I mean, one of the things is we were talking about, we've waited so long that we don't have to do wiring on some of these. Bluetooth will pick it up without even having to do some of the wiring so we can save expense. I mean, that's sort of, things are happening, and obviously you, Councilman, you know as well as anybody. Sewer rehab, that is something you recall, we have a sewer maintenance fund, there's a special assessment that's on the tax rolls that we get that. We have a balance of about, FBA, about 700 and
Right, about 720.
720. We have 850,000 that will be going toward that. So we'll be using a combination of what we have now, plus the monies we'll be getting next year to do about $850,000 worth of sewer rehab and upgrades. That is specifically set aside for that purpose. It is taxed for that purpose, and we're going to continue using in that direction. So those will be monies budgeted. The other item is the handicapped accessibility. This is something that's come up. This is not something necessarily that we do all lump sum, but there are some situations where I know we have some issues we should be dealing with. And as we do some of these pavement repairs, that's some things that I've talked to Akram about. Yeah, we should deal with that street when we're on there and whatnot.
Is it, what's going on out there?
Oh.
Apparently they said they've booked the room.
No, I'm not.
They're having that. The Model T Club. They're not aware that we're having a council meeting.
Well, we're close to the end of our agenda, so if you could bear with us for a few minutes, we'll be finished.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
I'll talk to him, but we didn't, this has been booked on the calendars for some time.
You know what, they've been booking it for years, so maybe they just assumed.
Yeah, I think that's what happened, but this has been publicized.
Yes, it has.
Marked
yeah.
on the calendars and everything, so I
It's
apologize
okay.
for any
Let's-
confusion.
Let's proceed.
But we have money involved here, so.
Okay, so the handicapped accessibility is something we'll be dealing with. That's sort of our list of things that we'll be trying to put in the budget and get us to it. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty and things that we're looking on and doing. But I've got some feedback already on some things that I know I need to do. Councilman, we talked one year when you were gone, the budgeting monies for travel individually by accounts by councilperson as opposed to a pool. So that was one of the questions I asked is, you know, so that's something that appears to be a consensus that we should be doing.
You know, I think that's just budgeting purposes. I mean, I think there's a certain amount of money we spend, and if you need to go somewhere, you do, and if you don't want to go somewhere, you don't go somewhere. I mean, yeah.
And sort of the question Twee had asked me is, are we going to budget just as a pool? And I can just take it as I need it and report it, or do you want to budget it so people sort of know? And I think Councilman Pitt suggested that he sort of can budget if he knows he's got X amount of the year. He can say, I want to do this, this, and this activity, set it over the course of a year. So that's sort of the list that we've come up with. If there's something missing, help me here.
I have one that's missing. I still think we should do something about automating our check writing.
I'm in favor of that.
We shouldn't be manually assigning checks in this day and age. It ought to be a way that you can automate that and just have someone go online and approve it.
Okay. We can
I
take a
actually
look at that.
disagree with that. I think that we're so small that I don't think it's that big of an issue to look at the small amount of bills that we write. We don't write that many. The check register is very little.
Well, Councilman,
Sorry.
one of the things that it's interesting is that I look and check off on every check. I know there's a limit that I don't have to sign, but I look at every check because I need to know what's going on, and I do that.
But
That's
you're
sort of-
supposed to sign every check. Why aren't you signing?
No,
it?
it's either one member of the finance committee or myself.
So
If
when
it's
did
under a
that-
certain dollar
When did that
amount.
change that the city manager
It's,
doesn't sign it?
if it's 4,000 over, it's 2 signatures.
Right, but in the
If
past.
it's
the
under,
city-
it could be one of 3 signatories, either 2 members of the finance
Two
committee
finance committee
or
or the city
myself.
manager.
Right, okay, so.
So, but I typically
Did the
sign.
protocol change? It was that the people in the budget and finance, one of them would look at it, approve it.
Yes.
And they would only sign the second signature if it was over the certain dollar amount. The city manager signed them after it got approved by the
No,
council.
the way it works now is nobody in finance, Frank doesn't sign any checks.
No,
He-
it did, it was the city manager.
I sign the checks, all of them, but we typically have relied on the council member from one
Then
of the
that
council members.
changed, because it must have changed with somebody else, because when I was mayor, Barnett was mayor, Reese was mayor, that's how it always was. We never signed it unless it was over $4,000.
Okay, well, is there anything else on the
Yeah, that's on the
update on
agenda,
the
because
budget?
that's something that I don't want to see change. I don't want to see everything automated on the checks. There's a lot of checks and balances by the council people looking at those invoices, not just online.
I disagree. I think it should be automated, just like we automating our business license. We don't have that many, but we automate it.
Right,
I
but
mean,
you need to look at the
nobody
invoice.
signs checks like that anymore in any size
Even
organization.
online.
But you're still not going through the approval of the invoicing.
It's
You're not
what?
You're not looking at the detail.
You can look at the detail. You can still look at the detail. You can look at it online.
So is it going to scan everything in?
Well, they can't scan everything in.
I think we can look and see what's out there, because I understand what
What's
you're
out
saying.
there is what's available.
I'm very cautious, so I sign every check. I don't care who else
I'd
is signing
rather
it.
take that money and stick it on Wanda Greenbelt. It doesn't take that much trouble to look at it. If we're
I disagree. I think it's something we should look at.
Well, I
We
think-
certainly can
well,
provide a number, and you guys
I
can decide.
don't agree with that
what you
at
wanna do.
all.
Okay.
Any other items that you want to talk about or think we should be considering and reporting back on June 5th? I keep saying January, but June 5th.
Well, I think that you have an item here with the green belt, which is great. But beautification is a general
Yes.
item that we need to look at. When I look at that you're making an assumption of 4% in our higher property taxes, and that, that is the value of us, I think that we have to put a certain dollar amount into the city to make the city look decent also. The Wanda Greenbelt and the wall on Wanda Greenbelt looks like it belongs in, certainly not our
Tijuana.
city. And I don't know how those people are gonna get 4% increase in value in their home if we don't start to do something, pretty quick. So I see the money in here. I think we need to put a little bit more money, quite frankly, into that. You could take it out of your contingency if you want, and stick it in there. But I do think that we need to put some more money in that at all. I'm a little concerned about the sales tax, and Frank, maybe you can answer that. So you're suggesting, based on our sales tax company that we got,
Yeah.
that we go up 3%. But when I look at the budget last year, I think it was projected that it would go down 3%, and we've lost a retail store in the center. So where is the sales tax going to come from? So I'm just trying to figure out where it's coming up, because we don't have the retail anymore.
It's still typically, they did a store by store, we can
Right.
provide you the detail. They came in and sat down and went through excruciating detail on every, about an hour's worth of every store, of what the sales projections were and what they thought and which stores. And they did factor in a vacancy rate. Now, they didn't, how long they stay vacant, but they factor in some sort of vacancy rate. And
Right,
that's an
because
assumption.
it was replaced with the non-sales tax
Right.
entity is the whole thing. Where it was, the place was leased, but it wasn't leased with something that's going to give us any income.
Right.
And that seems to be the trend here.
No, and I think one of the things we did talk about is the replacement of retail with service-oriented items, and that's what strip malls or town center types of structures are becoming. It's hard to compete with Amazon Prime. It's just hard,
The
and
mode of
that's
selling
the
is not
reality.
gonna be your answer.
So you're seeing that. I read something that the projections were nationwide, 40% of the malls are going to close in the next 5 years. Malls,
Correct.
the Block and those kinds of Brea malls and the South Coast Plaza type malls are going to close because they just can't sustain that level of business. There's still people that like to do it, and there's still people that don't. But I think that you make a valid point, and we do have a store by store. So I think we're pretty comfortable or conservative there. Sales tax is not a huge number for us. And I remember now, it was the numbers, I don't remember off the top of my head. Do you remember what it was?
I think the general sales tax about 237,000.
Okay. So we're not talking a significant delta,
Yeah.
candidly, that we're dealing with here. So I'm not uncomfortable with their projections, and they did some pretty substantial research on it.
I'm also just a little concerned with the PARS contribution of our second annual $100,000, just parting with that kind of money, not knowing where we're going in the next year. We do have some litigation, which we haven't had litigation in years in this city. I can't even remember the last time we had something that was going to cost us money. And in addition to the storm drain, which I think will have higher costs than what we've associated
Right.
with it. And that's a big unknown right now, that we've left that storm drain unfixed for as long as we
Right.
have.
Well, one of the concerns that I would say about the PARS, and I would say that I would like to think, PERS is going to change the discount rate they're going to drop it. And no matter what, our contribution annually is going to go up. So we're going to have an increase. So whether we put it toward PARs or we dedicate it towards something that's going to pay directly to PERS, we're going to pay more for our pension. It's just going to happen. If they drop it to 6% as they're, talking about right now.
A few years, right.
In a few years, that could be a huge increase for us. So I think we want to position ourselves in a, where we know something's coming. You're right, though, I agree. We could have litigation, like I talked about, that could be as much as lots of money, 6 digits. So if we are, but at the same time, we know we have a reality coming here. And that's not something that's going to change. So I think we ought to, and I think that was sort of the approach. Now, we'll put 100,000 this year. It's already been invested per the directions of the council. But that's an item that you have discretion on. You don't have to do that. You don't, there is no commitment in the contract with PARS that says you have to put money aside for that each year. So you're right, Councilwoman, you could say, well, given everything else, I want to change something. But that's, right now, we're going with prior direction, which was 4 years of 100,000 each year. But again, we're going to have a liability increasing, and it's going to catch us.
And then, and one other item that will come up, and we can talk about at the next meeting, are this additional $30,000 in engineering contract hours
Yeah.
is something that I will address next time as it comes in. But, I mean, I look at that, I want to see really, what did we get for an extra $30,000? Are we just having another body here to appease special projects? Or I actually want to see the results of what that $30,000 is actually giving us.
We can identify the project specific. Okay, that's fair.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I think what we want to do, our next meeting is the 6 o'clock on the June 5th, and we'll make sure that the Model T Club knows it's there. But I do thank you, because I think we've gotten some insights, and I think you got some insights of where we're thinking. If something comes up, please don't wait till June 5th to tell us that you think of, we've thought about this, and that's sort of what I told Frank this weekend. I woke up and I was thinking about something. I said, Frank, I came in on Monday, I said, we ought to do this or that, and he says, you're right, we got this budgeted or whatever. So things will pop into your head, so I appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate you sort of indulging us and letting us do it a little differently this year, and you giving us some input as we develop, as opposed to waiting till it's done. So thank you for your time, and I thank you for your focused concentration.
Well, thank you very much, and with that, we're adjourned.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Let me go out and apologize to make sure that.
They can wait till we're gone. I mean, we have.